And I believe we're live
Oh,
at the Comics Place.
at the Comics Place. Gallery
I'm
view.
in the Comics Place right now. I thought I was
too.
at home.
It's the closest thing that we've got to the Comics Place now. Except for the Comics Place, which everybody, that is a wonderful, holy cosmic egg that has made it through many a thing. But when you go into it right now, it is like, it is weird. There are just boxes that have been sitting unpacked, like ungone through on the floor for 2 weeks that like showed up the day after we closed, and like just tape. It is weird. It's like going back to your hometown after not having been there for 3 years. It's like the movie Garden State with a less bitchin' soundtrack.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what's going on here.
What's the excuse on the lame soundtrack then?
Oh, did you? I'm not going to take that.
Because I've heard the podcast intro, and that could work, my man.
Oh, okay. I see
Right?
what you're saying. It's just that there's nothing holding it together. There's no great thing down there. It's like Django and Jeff can't be there at the same time. So every time I'm there, I'm like, what is all of this? What has this all been about?
What we need are interior pictures of the Comics Place to use as backgrounds.
Django, I'm pointing at your square, and I want you to know that you're on that. That's on you.
Listen, if it looks like I'm not paying attention, it's because Zoom just got rid of their extra free time.
Did they really?
Yeah, so I am hustling to make sure that we don't get cut off here.
Okay, so it's going to be interesting, everyone. We're either going to run out of time at 8.5 minutes, or Zoom will be righteous and still let us use Zoom for free. That would be crazy to have gotten everybody hooked on it in the end times and then be like, oh, and now you have to start paying for the after 40-minute usage.
Yeah, well, they just did it. They did it already. It's pretty exciting. So, I mean,
sure?
Listen, people are watching us right now. We're live, and
are the gates closed?
There's a couple people waiting. Let's let Mr. Goff and Andrew Carlson in here.
Nice. And I bet Ashton will be along shortly.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye out for it.
Keep an eye out for him. I'm not sure if the gates close or not. Was that a thing that?
No, we'll let him in.
Okay, cool. 8:04. Comics Place is live now. Okay. I was like, what is this about? Yeah, there's a message there. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Matt.
Oh, hey.
It was cool to get everyone's orders for East of West Volume 2 after we did last week's video.
Yeah, we got to deliver a handful of copies to everybody. That was cool.
Yeah. How are we pretty well stocked on the latter volumes?
Yeah, I think we got enough to cover at least the book club, if not more.
Okay, well, so before we get into this whole thing, let's talk about, we had to make a sort of executive decision on what are things that we are stocked well enough on that we would like to have discussions about for our alternating non-East of West book club thing. So I'm not sure if Django posted it anywhere, but we wanted the next one that we were going to do to be Middle West. So to just be the opposite of East of West, although still directionally themed. In fact, isn't the Middle West just sort of between East and West?
It is. Maybe it's a prequel. I guess we'll have to wait
Middle
until next
West
month
is East of West.
Okay.
Oh,
true. Good Lord.
Mike has us there.
Yeah. But anyway, so we have a bunch of those. If people want to get down on that, we'll probably do Middle West next week. And then the following week, we could either do just volume 3 of East of West, or we could do 3 and 4. I'm not sure.
Let's kind of feel it out. See what everybody's feeling after this tonight.
Yeah. The flow of this volume was different than the flow of the previous volume.
I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, so should we dive into it? Should we just get it?
Yeah,
should we
go for it. I think this subscription that I've been trying to do and listening with one ear is
it's been upgraded by the host.
Has been upgraded by the host.
Unlimited minutes.
The number of times that I've had like Django just sort of silently go in and swordfish it so that we get to make sure everything still works is very, very good. Happens often.
Swordfish.
Django, none of your passwords are swordfish, right?
No.
I shouldn't have said that out loud.
They all involved. Well, they used to involve 666, and I found out that was a different. They found an earlier translation of the Bible, and it's actually 616. I had to change all my passwords. It's like a whole The whole thing.
Like the
It's-
Marvel Earth?
Yeah. Marvel Earth accidentally named itself after the original Mark of the Beast.
Ooh.
Speaking of the beast,
Yeah, great segue.
yeah.
When we could use that weekly on the podcast because
Shoot.
mostly we're just like, well, the next
it's not a
book.
segue, it's a segwin.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Winsec wins.
Yeah, Braden and Win with the English language. All right. Well, so here, hey everyone, thanks for showing up for week 2 of the Perfectly Acceptable Podcast or Guest Comics. I guess we haven't figured out how this is branded yet.
I've just been calling it Comics Plays Book Club.
Yeah, I know, but we could have, thrown the podcast names out there a little
Oh,
extra.
gosh. Yeah.
Learn how to
Perfectly
publicize
acceptable book
ourselves.
club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully better than that. But volume 2, East of
Oh.
West. I've got a bunch of contextual information. I don't. That was just the first time. We made
But it was great.
it. Volume 2.
And your
Or-
contextual information
Oh,
from
well,
volume
thank you.
1.
If
So
other
whatever
brains,
whatever through line you're gonna put in here, it'll still be great. I think it's a good anchor to start with too.
and I did
something like that.
I did also find for some contextual information that single issue, the guide that came out, is collected in the 4th paperback.
Okay.
So I bet that it came out between volumes 3 and 4, and that's why it's in the first hardcover. But yeah, they put it in the 4th paperback. Jonathan Hickman, Nick Dragotta, we're here. We did it. What did everybody think? How do you start it, Django?
I think this felt like he was kind of moving the story forward through a lot more context for characters, and introducing like the cowboy, the judge. I don't know.
The
what the heck
Texas
is
Ranger
he?
guy with the robot dog gun
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah, Captain Texas is what I was thinking of him as. He's like Captain
Holy
America,
cow.
but for the nation of Texas.
He is
I like
so
it.
cool.
And more context for a lot of the characters, the main chosen ones.
Yeah.
We are-
Yeah, whereas the first volume had that thing of here's a bunch of confusing information and then this sort of moment where you broke through and it all started to fit together. This one to me, while I enjoyed all of it, it was sort of like each issue was an amount of energy to get through and there were still puzzles being put together the whole time. I didn't have a sort of moment where I was like, oh, okay, and then the friction was gone and I kind of just like slid down the water slide, if that makes any sense.
In this volume or the last one?
In this one, so like this one was a lot of sort of introducing other pieces on the board, but they're a little bit more peripheral characters. So
you didn't get to
whereas-
feel like wet and slippery, like you were sliding down the main plot line during this one.
Yeah, or just like there was this moment in volume 1 where sort of the characters became clear and the motivation started to click. And so then things just sort of a sequence of events became logical. Whereas this one, I could understand why each event happened after it happened.
Yeah.
But, it's sort of most clearly like the time. Oh gosh. I'd have to just a second.
While you're looking for that, I certainly wasn't surprised though that we had a last page in volume 1 that gave a clear direction for the rest of the book. I will go find my son.
Right.
And then the next 5 issues basically had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit, but
they
he's
sprinkled
always-
it in.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is like the sort of political machinations of like issues 3 and 4 of this, where the Union is sort of financially bankrupt, and then the introduction of the kingdom and that particular issue, where we met like John Freeman, I think his name is. But as that issue is happening, I was like, okay, what is this? What do these mean? Until that last page was like, go, buy a nation. And then I was like, all right, let's go back to the beginning of that issue and see how all of this made that idea make sense. And that was an instance of like, it really did need a second time through for me. It wasn't like a self-evident moment in the book.
Did you read the whole thing twice?
No.
Okay.
No, I read that whole issue twice though, because it was so internally consistent once you understood kind of what they were talking about, or like what exactly was happening with the Union in the issue before that and that one. And I'm not super great at like political national level thinking, if that makes any sense.
I really like the just kind of the origin story of the Ranger guy. and then the final page reveal at just how much of a badass crack shot he is. That was such a good just a really good way of showing just how far that guy can shoot you.
That pacing of that reveal was impeccable.
Yeah. And that issue kind of nailed home the motif that they're doing of like 2/3 of the way through each issue. You get that full single page shot of like a person's head or a piece of action. That image there that Wynn's showing is incredible. But like the shot
cool.
of when Death like just has his full page headshot with his eyes, like he's got the patch. Also just like from issue 1 into issue 2, while we're learning the origin of Captain Texas, it like even that sequence of events kind of needed me to, once I finished it, I was like, okay, so he got framed for betraying the group and then escaped and then like went and crashed to a spot where the Ranger's dog would find him and take him there. Like all of that, like it again sort of made me think of that question of like, is this obfuscating what's going on for the sake of doing that, or is it style, or does it actually serve the story better? And that's kind of the question I've kept having through this.
I think it serves the story quite well.
Yeah.
It's he's from the instant that the dog finds him, the robot dog, and he speaks familiarly with it and he knows who his master is, you get the information from that. Okay, he's gone to somewhere where there's a person that he knows.
Right.
And trusts to some degree. And overall, the thing I like with this volume is there's the running through line of the Death storyline, which you could see as the main storyline of the whole comic. But yeah, as you're saying, we have these very good, thorough examinations of the peripheral characters, the members of the Chosen. So those characters are getting a lot of really quick, thorough examination, and then periodically we're getting glimpses back into this conversation with the Prophet, and that's a very slow burn storyline that we get little glimpses of, and then we go back to a different character. We go back to the president or to John Freeman, or it's I like that style of connecting all of the individual issues together in this volume.
Yeah, it seems like how evident all of this is in Hickman's brain to be able to so effortlessly be like, okay, we're here and now we're way over here, and thread it through in such an effective way.
Mike said quick and thorough. I think that is such a Hickman, like quick and thorough. Like you get so much out of these little things and you get popped all over the place, but each one feels substantial.
Talk about a real never-ending treasure hunt for Death, though. Just like, go here and talk to this person. All right, now go talk to this person. Or they say, go talk to this person. Go talk. Oh, no, they just got shot. It's like, poor buddy. He must love riding that giant mechanical horse because he's doing it a lot.
I kind of wonder if part of the feeling that you're getting, Jeff, where you don't really you don't get a lot of clarity until after the fact. I wonder if he's not doing that to kind of give you the feeling of having received the message and having to apply it after things have happened.
So that occurred to me as sort of when Mike was talking last time about, what if Lord of the Rings had all of these just sort of like absolute statements throughout it. And I was thinking about like, well, what if all of these statements we're getting on these issues? I was like, I need to be writing these down on a piece of paper. And then what if there was some trick of putting it together in the same way that the message was like put together as several people from disparate places? And I thought that would be a very fun activity that Hickman probably has mapped out. With some...
I kind of wonder if... Oh my gosh.
Django.
I was just making sure our feed was working, and there it was, loud for everybody.
Echo.
Yeah.
You're just really outlining the way that Jonathan Hickman uses the meta to tell the story, and you're kind of telling the story with him.
This is us talking about it, and I really like, how he's telling the story. I think it works really well. I'm sort of an apologist for Hickman. Like I'm always like, oh, it's going to be great. Just love it and enjoy it. And it's going to get good and it'll make sense. but this one, because it is so, I'm getting to read it all together. Like the sort of formula of each issue started to really make sense. Like, because I did sit down and read all of this in one sitting. It was sort of like the first couple pages, and then you have the break, and you go to a different spot, and then it all comes back together in this moment. And yeah, all in all, I really liked Volume 2 for its exploration of the periphery, but it didn't feel as smooth to get through. It was a little bit more herky-jerky for me, if that makes any sense. I still really liked it, but it didn't have necessarily a sense of momentum.
I really liked the short little blurbs to get you through the issue, and that might just be kind of the headspace that I'm in, where give me 4 pages so that then I can go check on the progress of the coronavirus on Facebook and come back and read another 6 pages.
I haven't been on Reddit in 30 minutes.
Yeah. But it worked pretty well for my current kind of scattered way of engaging in all media and Legos and life in general. So the cowboy was probably my favorite. I really liked the dude who got the monster on his arm.
Oh.
And just like the situation that he was suddenly in was a real bummer and a lot of fun to read.
And the examination of conquest as a person and as an entity and as a concept in relation to that character, that maternal relationship that absolutely makes sense for the embodiment of conquest to carry out. I like that a lot as well.
Oh, I didn't think about that. That's a really interesting point.
I like
conquest
the
to sort of
distinction.
take a child,
because war is about to just kill him.
Yeah.
So, but conquest is the one who steps in and goes, no, I'm raising this. This is mine. I'm taking it.
Yeah,
right.
Which makes the sort of act of death, having taken a lover, not such an insane thing when we are seeing aspects of humanity drip into the other horsemen.
That's a great point. Yep.
Did you think that there was there's a similarity in the character design of the president and of Conquest? Do you think that was just the artistic similarity, or do you think there's something else? Because it was really strikingly similar.
There's one page that shows like big long hair behind it.
Yeah.
When it's Conquest, and you see a couple pages where the president, like this one, you see how long the president's hair is right here. And then there's one page of Conquest that one of us will probably find where Conquest is facing us, and you can see the long, presumably hair trailing behind.
Yeah, exactly. Mike's got that page there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's 2 pages apart. Like, it's literally just a page flip.
And I wonder what happened to those old bodies, or why they're no longer those bodies, or if that could somehow be related, because Conquest no longer has that body.
You think that they leave the bodies and come back as children, and the bodies are...
I have no idea, but we know that there's some element of, renewal to the 4 horsemen.
I can tell you want to say things about that.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not Stephanie Brown. I don't give out spoilers.
You can even fold the book here and get...
It's like a Mad Magazine.
It's like Mad Magazine.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure. That'll be... Yeah, I wonder how the president will tie into all this. Also, she had that just like brutal ass scene where she's down on the floor.
Yeah, when she's dealing with the protesters.
Yeah.
That was a novel way that felt fresh to give a pretty classic thing of like leave one alive and make them spread the word. It didn't, it felt like it was a good ride along the way. And then that was just the punctuation. It wasn't the whole purpose of the scene.
One thing that I really liked about this book, and I kept wanting to talk about it last week, was the eyeballs. Because they had the eyeball in the bartender in the first volume, and in this one there are more eyeballs.
We get context for what's going on with that eyeball.
Yeah.
So what was the deal with the dude's eyeball in the first issue of Volume 1?
You have to presume that it was the same eyeball, or one of
so that's what we're assuming.
Because
it even says that the hunter has one of the eyes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I take that back. Now I'm not remembering if it says that in the volume or in the one shot.
And they're the Oracle's eyes. And that's why they can like talk, right?
That's why they can snitch.
Yeah. Unless all eyes are just snitching. I mean, it does pluck out of death pretty easily.
Right.
That whole scene in the prison was super good. The rain dripping down in the distance and like how we slowly panned up close to it was so well done.
Yeah, and actually to that point, like I like how the first volume Death seemed a lot like more unstoppable than he was in this issue or this volume, whereas like he's being put through the ringer here and he's kind of at the mercy of several other things. Like just the giant fight sequence at the king, like with the kingdom when that member of the Chosen is killed is awesome. But like Death isn't exactly just sending people to hell at that point.
Circumstances are controlling him a little bit here too, that it doesn't matter how powerful you are, he needed the information. And it's pretty clear throughout that whole interaction that, I mean, he can't even bluff because of her power essentially. And that's kind of interesting.
Right.
Yeah. And he's a victim of circumstance as well in how he's denied at the very end of this volume the information that he really, really needs, ironically because of a death. And bear in mind, the Texas Ranger isn't trying to stop Death from finding his child.
Right.
That was just purely circumstantial that happened at the exact moment that he was about to get what he was looking for.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had seen the Texas Ranger like on covers before, and I thought that was the Solomon character with that mask on. But I really like that character design, like that helmet with the tubes in its nose that like gives it the look of like a Texas mustache or something. Like, yeah, it's like a Judge Dredd Western thing.
So good,
and also a little bit Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah, well, yeah, the judge, the big dude, yeah.
Well, but didn't he steal the helmet from the judge?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and Harkonnen has the oxygen.
Oh,
in
he does have
anyway.
Oxygen. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I'm most interested in this sort of in the final issue here with the Kingdom character and like that idea of like debt, and I just loved like that's such a Hickman thing to do, to have this like lofty conversation about debt and obligation and owing somebody, like disguising this giant political thing, but also just dealing with like when somebody brings you a snack at work or something, you're like, that idea of like, don't ever take generosity from somebody if you can get it yourself. It's just like, God, I bet Hickman is a cold father.
But always give when the opportunity comes around, because then people are in your debt.
Right.
Oh, it's just such a skewed selflessness. It's just almost darker than the other end of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I had an Oracle question before we move on from her.
Please.
Probably no bearing to anything, but I'm assuming on this big single page of her, down on the side, are those the like robot dogs skeletons, or is that the thing that Death is riding, or what? What do we think was dead in there with her?
It looked like fish to me. That's probably what she's been eating all this time.
And it had a strong Gollum vibe to the whole thing.
I'm into the fish idea. Yeah.
I don't know what page that's on.
It's like halfway. Gosh, it's almost directly halfway through.
Oh, I went way too far back.
The eye consumption scene is so gross. Like when it's sucking the eye up.
Oh yeah, those look like fish to me.
How about how awesome that the dude's sniper rifle is his dog?
Yeah.
What a cool, like, just folded up dog. Very good.
So I've been reading this, the Batgirl and the Robin Year One series, and Immortal Hulk. And this and Immortal Hulk both have people with crazy sniper rifles, because there's the dude in the Immortal Hulk whose arm like morphs into a gun. So I just keep reading things about people with wacky guns. Maybe that's just comics.
Yeah,
well,
comics
Jeff's
are all
playing
wacky
Final
guns.
Fantasy with the guy with the gun for an arm as well.
It's all giant swords and guns. Yeah. Nathan, so I'm curious, like, sort of last time you had walked out of volume 1 just being like, kind of, what is this thing? Or wanting like a ground to stand on. How did this volume feel in terms of the ease of communicating ideas versus the first issue, like volume?
I was there. It was fine. It was, I mean, not fine. It was great. I think it really was just the first foundation that was needed. I don't know if I'm just not great at that or what, but your just explanation of honestly who was who. I think the first volume, even if it is just me, I think there's a little bit of fault in there of introducing different parties of people and not even remotely aligning them, and also not putting them in any sort of time, because you have different groups of people in different numbers that would fit with each other. Like you have 3 horsemen, and then you have 3 people with death, and you can, I don't know, maybe I don't have as much experience, but it was not an easy the barrier to entry felt pretty high until it was explained to me, and then now I'm good moving forward. Like this was a breeze, and maybe I'm biased towards it because the plot itself and the way it went through, just because I didn't have to work at it as much. But yeah, it was awesome. I wonder if Matt, if you felt the same way.
I was just gonna say, I agree with you from that standpoint, that it was so much of a breeze. And if I was to, cast similar criticism back on the first volume, it's like the same thing that we were stuck on before in volume 1 with all these introductions. I felt like there was very little discussion of all of these 7 in volume 2, for better or for worse. I felt like it flowed and was a lot snappier. And like Django said, like I could read it in chunks, and I felt sucked into a couple of pages, and then I could read a little bit and put it down and pick it up and read a couple pages, and it would go through like snapshots. And just kind of looking back at volume 1 and all this stuff that was a slog to get through in the beginning, I'm sure there'll be payoff later, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of payoff for a lot of that slog in volume 2.
So like a lot of you get a lot more context for the way people interact in volume 3, and I'm excited to finish it and to talk about it. But a lot of groups kind of come together, and you start seeing how they play with each other in like partway through the next volume, which I really appreciated having that context. And then kind of going back and reviewing these after having read that, I juiced a lot more out of volume 1 and 2. So
yeah, there's a part in like Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run where there's sort of like an epic, big, great story, and then there's just like a chunk of issues that you're like, all right, these are fine, but like they don't have a lot of like self-evident value into a larger story until this thing happens 15 issues later, and then everything kind of falls together. And this volume to me felt a little bit like those issues. Like, okay, we're over here, and my absolute sort of faith in all of his ability to pay off any confusion or work that goes into it was there for it. But it was a little bit like, just ready to follow death around.
Have any of you read Planetary? Because it is.
I've read the first volume of Planetary at least.
I read all 4 of those like
on my
3
list.
months ago.
So that series feels like 27 vignettes or something like that have like kind of accidentally been sewn together into a larger story. And you do get like 2-issue story arcs and things like reach out and touch other stories, but for the most part, any one of those is a one shot. And that's kind of how I felt about this volume of East of West. Was like, oh yeah, I could enjoy this story of the dude escaping from the tower and shooting the tentacle off of his neck and crash landing just as much as I could enjoy the story of the guy killing the judges and stealing their helmets because he's a hat guy.
Do you think it takes more talent to do one over the other? For Warren Ellis accomplishing, let's say, really making those one shots that felt like you could bite off one and then not come back for a while, or Hickman making it and accomplishing the idea that they really are going to fit together. I don't know if one.
I think it's just two very different writing styles, and I think that Hickman is completely capable of doing either one, and I think Warren Ellis can do either one also.
I think it is also worth mentioning that like Warren Ellis, and I was listening to some other folks have a conversation similar to this, but Warren Ellis came up in a time where the industry hadn't shifted to kind of trade storytelling. So single issue storytelling is what there was, so
yeah, like a 4-issue story arc was weird to have something that long.
Yeah. Or Transmet,
same thing.
There's like an overarching story, but in as much as there's also, it's a lot of 1 and 2 issue vignettes within it. And Hickman yeah, I think he does the sort of single issue things pretty well, and he does it in his Marvel work as well. But I don't know. I think he would have a hard time not sort of trying to be telling a larger 6 to 12 issue story at any given time.
Yeah, and I think he's pulling it off with X-Men right now, right? Like almost any one of those issues, if you have an awareness of X-Men, you could jump in, and if you read it carefully, you're not going to be too lost to enjoy it. But they definitely are additive at the same time.
Yeah,
it's almost like he uses. Maybe this is just defeating the purpose of the whole one-shot idea, but it's almost like he uses his 3 issue arcs can be as disconnected as some other people's one-shots. Whereas, like, some things move all the way through, but in the Fantastic Four specifically, the Bridge, the first 5 issues or whatever, were their own one-shot, and then it was disconnected from so many other things for a long time. So it's almost like he just takes more liberty to take more time to tell those one-shots, and then cuts them off with the same amount of abruptness. But then you're right, in this one, I guess, which is the book we're talking about, I got the feel that you could focus in without having to worry about people you're not looking at within each story. And I think that's advantageous, if nothing else, just to take a little bit of a break and get to know somebody a little bit.
Will, you had said this is the second Hickman book that you've read, that X-Men is the first one. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike, have you read other Hickman stuff?
I have, in bits and pieces. I've got first volume. I read the first 6 or 7 issues of his Fantastic Four run.
Okay, so it's not, you're
like if I looked down a list of all the stuff that he's written, I'd go, oh yeah, I've read that, but not everything, obviously.
I'm just curious what how people who've never read Hickman would be coming to this. But
I feel like that would almost be somebody who hasn't read very many modern comics, and that would be a hard thing to do.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about sending this to a friend of mine back in Spokane as I was reading this today. But yeah, Hickman just...
I think this might have actually been the first Hickman book that I read. Just because I didn't really get into reading indie books until I was working at a shop. Just because I was very Marvel and I got like the odd DC. But once I was working in a shop, I got gifted the first volume. And I think that, like, probably there's something else by Hickman I had read prior to that, but like it was the first thing that I was like, oh, okay, I know who Jonathan Hickman is, but I haven't really read his stuff. And volume 1 of this was the first thing I read, and I really loved it.
Okay.
All was prior to this that actually was released prior? What Marvel stuff?
A Fantastic Four. He had started his New Avengers run not too long before this. So Secret Warriors would have been before this. His Shield run would have been before this.
Holy crap.
This was like a year before Time Runs Out, or alongside Time Runs Out?
Probably about a year before it. Yeah.
And this was after he had done Secret and Red Wing and Transhuman, Nightly News. So like he had a bunch of short image books under his belt.
Was Secret Warriors his first Marvel project?
Yeah, and he co-did that one with Bendis, which is sort of like how he got his leg in the door there, because Bendis gave him a lot of support as a young writer.
Is that the one with the black covers with gold embossing?
No, that's
Secret War.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The one with like Daisy and Maria Hill and stuff.
They're all half black, half white covers. Classic Hickman.
Okay.
I just flipped through this and like, gosh, is his name Ezra? Is that the...
Yeah, Ezra, Prophet.
Just that whole like, nope, you finally made me very proud, and you're just gonna have to live with this horrible thing attached to your arm. And then like after I got to that page, I was like just so excited to like, what is gonna be the progress of this person moving forward? And it's probably going to have a sort of surprise, very significant turn, I would imagine.
Yeah, or a very bummer turn. I really enjoyed this page that had the creation of the tower. That was, I like the way that showed time.
I liked for the kind of pacing of that segment in relation to its theme. It felt very biblical. that you just have, he asks, "Do I please you?" And she says, that depends. Are you what the message demands of you? And he says, "No." And then he builds the tower, and then again he asks,
I just want to be liked.
Oh
yeah.
I think we dropped out of Mike's audio.
He muted.
Mike, I believe you're on mute.
Oh yeah, there we go. Shift Command A unmutes as well.
There we go. Sorry, that was my computer throwing stuff at me.
All good.
Yeah. So what was saying? Yeah, it's that very biblical pacing of repeating the same question, getting the same answer from essentially his God.
Yeah.
And on the
like the antithesis
rule of threes has to hold in these things. Right?
Yeah. Like a funny joke.
Right.
Guys.
Yeah.
I felt like the prophet had a lot of emotion when he was asking, "Do I please you?" I don't feel like you see a lot of emotion in the characters from a, I don't know, not from an aggressive standpoint. I'm looking specifically at this page and panel, if that shows up right.
Yeah.
You're gonna see how done he is with wanting to work so hard, it seems.
Well, all the emotions fabricated. I mean, everybody's trying to fabricate everything, and it feels like every piece of dominance or emotion that's put forward is fabricated, except for his. Nobody's been dominated like that quite yet.
I think he figured out frustration right there.
Well, even just the page right after the one Matt just showed us of just like from going from one page of like, "Do I please you now, mother," to the next page being like, "Please cut it off." So like going several pages, living your life sort of under the guise that I'll be what this person wants. And then that moment of finally caving and be like, "I don't care what you want. Please stop doing this," was like a really powerful scene. And I guess I'm always, there's kind of an active conversation about how effectively Jonathan Hickman writes emotions. And a lot of folks feel like he can world build really well, but doesn't hit emotional beats super well. And I've always felt like he does really well when he wants to. And it's like moments like this, like, it'll be a story driven thing until like he can very deftly convey very powerful emotions, I feel like, and that's a good instance of it.
Using
There's
contrast.
a lot packed into that as well, that when Conquest asks, "Have you become what the message demands?" very quietly says yes. He's not denying that this is all part of the greater plan, and the great, his entire life's work is built up to this, and he acknowledges that, and he is self-aware enough and true enough in his faith that he believes that fully, that this is what's supposed to happen to him, but also acknowledge that he doesn't want it to happen.
Right.
And that also well, yeah, please
can I air a grievance?
Please.
I am kind of tired of how much death his face, he's always just sneering like a 90s X-Men comic. His face is a sneer almost every panel he's in.
Have you read a couple of those 90s X-Men comics, Matt?
Say what?
Have you read a couple of those 90s X-Men comics?
Just a few, just enough to see that there's a lot of sneering.
It reminds me of the Santa Killers a lot.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Or Jonah Hex.
I wonder how much of that is like a limitation, because I really like Nick Dragotta's art. There are also like strange commonalities within a lot of the faces. Like I just flipped through a random phase and like, Walker Texas Ranger is also sneering next to somebody else sneering, and everybody kind of has like large childish eyes and almost have like an air of childish nature to them, unless he's drawing them as like very gaunt. Like I'm wondering, this is the most Nick Dragotta I've ever had like in a series, so it's interesting to just kind of, for me, be figuring out what his style is. And I think that maybe there are some repeated facial tics.
Like what does this face need to be there with "I'm here to see the lady"? I mean, it could, but
I don't know that. I mean, that I was gonna say, because that's, if I mentioned last time we were talking about how much some of this reminded me of Kill Bill, or just Tarantino-esque in nature. So sometimes some of these facial cuts, like this, I beg to fucking differ. Like this just struck me so much. This back and forth of kind of this Tarantino kind of quipping back and forth. You have no quarrel here. Well, I beg to fucking differ. And then it, launches into this gnarly, fight scene. I kind of really like some of those facial close-up shots, and just reminds me of some great cinema.
I kind of took it as like a Clint Eastwood sort of deal. Like he looks and he dresses Western. like he only really ever talks through his teeth.
Except it still is everyone. I mean, here's Texas Ranger.
And that's the one that showed up in my mind. Yeah, and I wonder if it's just sort of, if you're Nick Dragotta and you're trying to draw facial and you're looking up context shots of like, all right, show me some Western faces, and Google image is just like, here's a bunch of sneering cowboys, and I wonder just like the recency effect or the primacy effect, just like how easy it is to recall some of these ideas as him and being an artist. I really like the art, but I also do think that there's some instances of like growing pains within it, and I would consider like repeated facial expressions to be one of those.
If I were on the side of the table on the debate team that said that it was purposeful, I would say that it's because everybody's playing the same game and everybody's putting on the same face. And
I like that.
I don't know. That's kind of just apologizing for something that probably is an oversight, but I think that could be fun to think about that from everybody from Death to Walker Texas Ranger. They're all kind of playing the same game that they don't know how to play.
Man, I really enjoyed the scenes in the kingdom here, and they come around in the next volume in a nice way. But just the dudes who look the same but have a different station in life, and then just kind of how cold the king is. I like that interplay quite a bit.
And the insight into the history of the kingdom, I really loved. I just loved that like subtle but incredibly impactful bit about where the lines were drawn for the Gulf, and so who has the oil,
right?
And then that being what allows the kingdom to have the huge sway of influence later on. That was one page that I had to immediately read 2 times. The 3-page or 3-panel thing here. Because I don't know, you have those, for me, I have those moments where I'm like, oh, this is important, and my ability to track it kind of goes down. So I'm like, oh, let's just do it again. Like, just redo the text bubble till it sinks in, like good poetry, I guess.
Yeah.
Should we go to our resident Civil War expert, Mike McCabe?
Mike McCabe.
How about it?
Yeah, okay. I mean, what I definitely found interesting there, what's going through my head a lot with this volume is how, you have all of these individual issues that closely examine one of the characters in one of the 7 nations of America, and each one therefore examines a different theme. You have the examination of justice and personal responsibility with the Texas section, which leans very heavily on 2 kind of historical precedents, which is the Texas Rangers, the whole idea of one ranger, that one Texas Ranger should be able to solve any problem. And that's why they're these very rugged, individualized characters who take this massive responsibility on themselves, paired with the idea of hanging judges, the really corrupt judge dropping down these really harsh sentences or no sentence at all. In the kingdom, what is really interesting is how, given after slavery, given an emancipated population, given a bunch of wealth and a bunch of land, reclaims their culture. Everything in there has historical West African tone to it. Yeah. The king with many sons, all of the patterns of the culture there. There are little aspects of New Orleans and whatnot. He goes to a blues concert to relax, but the overall tone and the feel is like this is a wealthy African nation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like that. And yeah.
When they're doing the backstory on the kingdom there, and on the second panel, it says, when the fire fell from the sky, our people well armed owed much Union money. Is that fire falling from the sky? Is that the same scene where in the first issue it sort of showed this seemingly like nuclear explosion?
Yeah, the thing that was like a comet or something blowing up. Yeah.
So with the exception of like maybe Django and Wynn who've read it, like, do anybody have theories on what that is? Or like that seems to be, I guess we're in such a techno society in this, and it is a number of years in the future, but not a number of years in the future that seems like it would justify that advancement in technology. Do you feel like, I don't know, that when the fire fell from the sky is an interesting thing that keeps coming up that seems to be a large diverging point between our history and this book's history?
I don't know anything about that, but I wonder if it's not like the Horsemen coming down.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the two main divergences from history are the message and this fire coming from the sky. So you have to, those two are connected.
Right.
So I'd say it's entirely.
Oh, Mike muted himself.
We dropped him right out at the end there. They're right at the end there. Yeah.
I'd say that they're both supernatural.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm very eager to see. Hickman has such a tendency to sort of leave big things like that in plain sight, sort of like the House of X, Moira lives and stuff. So like I've imagined there's going to be a moment where the frame of reference for everything twists just a little bit around a thing that we know has been there, but it sort of redefines it all. I think that's a kind of classic Hickmanism.
Yeah, experientially, we have to believe that it's going to alter something, and we will find that out. It's not just going to sit there as a plot device.
Right.
Can I ask a question that might make me feel stupid? Have we heard the message? Did I read it somewhere in here?
Not
at least
not in its
parts of it.
entirety.
Yeah.
Have you heard the good news?
At the beginning, there was a lone man, a broken sparrow, one apart, a son of night, the first of four, the end of everything. And
yep. Is that what the president speaks when she kind of does her little quiz?
This is right at the beginning of this.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
The bit,
the president says some too. She recites some when she
it's cropped up in a lot of ways, like a cup of a cup, a chalice of a chalice.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of lines have continued to come up, which is
why this a part of the message? Are these all clips? Or
I think a lot of them are,
and
or thematic.
All of them be or not.
That's why I want to write them all down and try and rearrange them or create some.
I tried to read the volume ones all through. There were like 7. I ran out of fingers. I was reading it and I kept sticking fingers in. I was like, oh, there are too many.
Yeah.
And they didn't read. I mean, you could string sentences together, but they didn't read like, whoa, if you put, it wasn't that yet.
Right.
At least.
The real question is, did Hickman write the whole message?
Oh,
he probably did.
Yeah. He usually writes alphabets. He's got like 4 different alphabets for different series. So he's probably got it somewhere.
I'm just glad I didn't completely miss it, because I know I saw little parts of it here and there, but I just kept thinking maybe I missed it somewhere.
Hey, Will, you need to watch it on questions that might make you sound stupid. That's my thing. Okay.
There are no.
I'll just start texting it to you.
There are no stupid questions.
Just let me be
your
voice. As long as it's dumb, send it to me, guys.
We're all talking about comic books, so we're all equally in the boat of we're having a book club about comic books. So
Jeff, when you were talking about Hickman not being super great at writing emotion unless it's kind of a plot point.
Whoa, no.
Well,
I don't feel that way, but I'm aware of, I always disagree with the people who say that.
I think he just doesn't write an emotional, like he's writing plot bits, kind of in the way that like when you and I communicate, a lot of times I come in with like the logistical bullshit, and then you're like, okay, and this is how it makes people feel when you attack everything like it's a problem to solve. And I wonder if that's just not like Hickman kind of writes from that angle, and you are able to see through that and find the emotion where people who criticize him for that aren't as able to kind of get in and kind of understand the emotion behind the analytical bits.
If I had to like create a kind of bullshit theory, it is that Hickman he's been in the same relationship for a very long time, and he strikes me as a very kind of analytical, problem-solving person, kind of like yourself.
Definitely.
and I think that he has been close to either people or person for long enough that he also kind of understands the other half of that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like his emotions, I don't think he's bad at all at conveying them. And I think that they're in very effectively, but I almost feel like he kind of has the ability to be like, all right, plot beat. Now let's take a bit of humanity, put it right there. Like, and it's like, it is an intelligent, analytical, intentional way of doing it. And I don't think that is anything less, but I think that it kind of comes from a learned awareness. Like, I think he can use it in a way that it's not like the kind of blind instinctual thing that he has. It's sort of like he's aware of like maybe how tools. He talks and how his partner talks or his kids talk, and he can kind of use different voices.
Like Django said, tools. I think it's just it. I completely agree with it. I don't know, like in a simpler way, you just have different writers that open up their toolbox and they go to different sections of the toolbox. And I don't think maybe it's because he's learned, maybe it's because of some emotional scarring, maybe it's because he's thinks emotions are beneath him and he's conquered it. I have no idea, but for some reason he goes to like the section of the toolbox that has unique plot devices rather than emotion. And I think every once in a while he's like, oh, let me plop in one of these like emotional Ezra beats over here. Yeah. And it's just not where he's at when he goes to build a puzzle. The puzzle pieces are. But no, say it again.
Sorry, yeah, Mike, do it. Mike, talk.
Stop saying all those body words where you bleep yourself.
A possibility is that he's this very analytical person. He figures out the structure and the plot of the world that he's creating. He creates these mechanisms and of the plot, and it's this overarching thing. He then sits down to write it. And in writing it, he discovers what the characters feel about that happening to them.
Yeah.
It's a common thing for writers. Yeah, you don't know how your characters are going to feel until they tell you how they feel, essentially.
Yeah,
I could definitely see that happening with some.
I'm so interested in that, like how writers talk about that. I think it's such an interesting thing, just that idea of like when a character speaks, to them as the writer, and it's
well, like think about how a Jeff Lemire story feels like he's just following his character's feelings rather than finding plot points, right? And Hickman feels like he's following plot points and finding the feelings there rather than letting the gut of the character drive.
Yeah, they could both build the same puzzle, but they're using different material to build that puzzle. I mean, they could both tell the same story. Honestly, I feel like one of them using the plot devices, one of them using the emotions to.
I would argue that like the emotion is a bigger part of it. Like in the first volume, the scene between Zhao and Death, like that scene just really doesn't work without the emotionality of like these are two people that haven't seen each other in 10 years, have suffered this great loss, and like obviously Zhao is coming from a place where she thinks her son is dead, and just that scene I don't think works without like already knowing that this is going to be an emotional scene. I don't think it's just plucked out because it's emotion. It's just like part of the scene. And like, definitely it does feel like most of the emotions in this book are aggression and anger and sometimes loss and sadness, but like I don't think it's not there though. I don't think that he's writing without thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that this, like, there is more emotion present in this book than a lot of. Well, I always find in his other books. I'm trying to think of, like, I think it was around the House of X time that a lot of people were coming into the shop and kind of voicing complaints about how maybe not emotional his writing is.
His purpose was to logistically rebuild a universe that's been alive for 40 years. It's not like his purpose wasn't. I can see why it would be a complaint of that series.
But yeah, Django, you're totally right. People never complain about X-Men.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how much more complaining there is about like Marvel or DC things. than there is like about a random image book. And I guess it makes sense with a larger body of people reading them, but it's
well, and also a larger history
right.
To get mad about somebody ruining forever and ever.
Speaking to Wynn's point, like that whole scene between Death and Zhao, I thought was like kind of packed with it, and it didn't even feel utilitarian. Like, I'm going to use my emotion beat now. Like it was like there was such a sense of individuals trying and feeling lost. Like, just that it'd be like, I want to go home, but I can't go home, and I want to so bad. Like it was baked into it. It didn't feel. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. It's like it was very baked in.
Yeah,
and like that scene, when I was rereading it to discuss it, like I was nearly in tears because I'm just like, this just fucking sucks.
And it wasn't even a bleeding heart scene. Like, oh, everybody just feels for you. I mean, it was just people feeling stuff, and Xiaolin was just kind of pissed the whole time. And you got to feel things on behalf of Death, but I thought it was cool that you got to feel your own stuff out of it.
Yeah, and I liked how like over it Zhao was, because she had experienced the worst of it, having thought all of it had been taken from her. So like, for sure, that just sort of like, when you can't even deal with it anymore, and it's just sort of like, it's done, just like, get it off my plate, I can't do this. Like, I like, she was there, and I hated
she had let it get taken out of her hands.
What's that?
She let the situation get taken out of her hands.
Oh, out of her. And I was
sorry, not sorry.
Finished this volume. I was like, well, let's just look at the first page of the next volume, and it's just like straight all Xiaolin, and I was like, oh dang, I want to be right there now. So I will be soon.
Is anybody else tired of seeing the personification of death as like a flawed, conflicted? I want death, and not in this story, but just in general, we keep seeing depictions of death that are like, oh, I kind of feel bad for death, but like, I just want to see the Saint of Killers, like an unrelenting death machine that
sure,
one-dimensional garbage writing. Like,
you can have the 80s anytime you want, buddy.
It's the great unexplored human relationship, the experience of the living with that which is beyond them, death. Like, there is no certainty. It's the great, like, I don't know, I don't have a secure relationship with it, so it therefore, as a personification, can't have a secure relationship.
Won't that be the definition of this decade, though? When we look at comics, it's this like, how profound is it to turn everything on its head when it comes to love and war and death, and like, isn't that just what we do now?
Yeah, I mean, meta storytelling. Let's just add a layer to it instead of.
I feel like we could have an entire other podcast about portrayals of death, or I could certainly talk about that for a while, because so many different ways of portraying death. And I think,
well, so if everybody wants to do a Zoom call for a personification of death podcast, we'll just do we'll actually make it a perfectly acceptable podcast, book talk conversation.
Yeah,
perfectly acceptable death cast.
Yeah, for coronavirus. I know there was bits in here. It was
comics
just
in the time of COVID.
Yeah, well, the bit about the Union and her, it had eerie similarities between what we're going, like the martial law.
Exactly the same.
I was like,
it felt weird hearing her say it, because she took it further than our countries had to go, and it was weird, like living in that world and feeling like I was having that told to me. It felt odd because I wouldn't want that told to me right now.
Yeah, it felt like, wow, I thought we were going a intentionally different direction.
We're reading the message.
So
right here.
So before we start our wrap-up conversation about scheduling for this book for the next coming weeks, does anybody have any other things they want off their chests?
I had one more. Oh,
thoughts.
Well, he was just saying thoughts.
Oh,
I had one more, like, just the fight with, what do they call him? Like the Demimorph guy when they go to
Chevelle.
like
Ganondorf.
Like the artwork, I'm sure it's not intentional or anything, but like that artwork makes me think of like Nausicaa in the Valley of Wind and Princess Mononoke. Like, makes me think of like the war machines from that. Like, I definitely don't think that's where they're going with it at all. Though the hoof fingers are super fucking freaky.
Did you play Breath of the Wild? Because that's That's the boss of Breath of the Wild right there.
Yeah, that's true. It's a big old
I've
cannon.
watched other people play it.
It is an interestingly like almost departure from the art that we were seeing up until that point. Like it just becomes like a very disfigured, perspective shot.
Mm-hmm.
I also loved the part near the end there with actually finding out the kid's motivations and that he's been tricking the council the entire time. Just like sliding that in, even though we've only had like maybe 6 pages with him total.
What is that?
The computer knew that the horsemen were watching and it was planning to kill him. And I love that, like, well, it's plotted out a month in advance is probably as far as I can see you. So we know that kid and his big helmet's going to be taken off here before too long.
My number one ranked intriguing plot point amongst all of them right now is definitely that.
Yeah. And whether or not it's the artificial intelligence that gained a morality by itself and has been teaching the child morality or independence or whatever, or is it the kid
Volume 3
who reprogrammed the computer? Yeah, Mike, that's what I want to find out next.
A cool causal relationship. I didn't think that's really cool.
Like, go Hickman for taking something that when we first read that conversation between the AI and the kid, and you hear what is how do you feel, and he says like does not compute, the equivalent of that. Right. That already in itself was cool. It was like, oh, what a cool thing, like that kid doesn't know anything. And then you realize later that it was like the other kind of cool that you could have felt by that. Like, that's so fun, taking a thing that already could stand on its own and then just snowballing it into something more.
I'll mention that in this volume, I didn't experience it all in the first one, but this one probably also as by virtue of just sitting down and reading it all in one thing, I did keep getting lost. I was like, wait, is that title page or is that the blank page at the end of an issue? Like this one, I really felt the sort of like, I'm just reading a chunk of pages right now.
Yeah.
And no complaint there, but I felt it here versus not in the first one.
I definitely read this more in the kind of classic convention of what a graphic novel was supposed to be back in the 80s.
Agreed.
This is a story in itself.
Yeah.
So
it's
Django,
nice to be able to read comics like that.
It is. It's nice to be able to read comics at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so folks, how do we want to do this? We thought it'd be nice to be able to try to appeal to a couple other voices, especially since we're going to be moving forward, and as with comics and ordering and subscriber counts, the further in a series goes, you just meet attrition. So maybe people will be dropping off. So we want to talk about the first volume of Middle West. So we might be sort of supplementing just other volume ones of different series. I think there's only 2 volumes of Middle West so far. Mm-hmm. So that's the one that we wanted to pick just because we've got a lot of it. I haven't read it, and it was one of Django's favorite books coming out in 2000.
That one's Scotty Young, right?
Yeah,
he writes it, and Jorge
synopsis
Corona.
Of it.
It's like a young kid who lives in sort of an alternate nearish future, really interesting built world, and he's got a dad who's abusive and turns into kind of a tornado when he gets mad, and the kid runs away and starts realizing that maybe he's got some of that in him too, like some of the tornado monster in him. And he's got a little fox sidekick, and I would say it's probably like young adult vibes, but I've read every single issue, which never happens to me with a Scotty Young story, and rarely happens to me with any New Image comic. It's
Was
a really
this the one that you like accidentally put on your top 2019.
I was surprised that I had done it, but like even now, this is months later, like I don't know what I would replace it with, because I do get excited every time it comes out. So
it's kind of like a dark indie fantasy. And it's like very character and relationship forward, and like sort of father-son relationship. I read the first issue and did like it a lot, and the art is gorgeous in it, so I'm excited to read more of it. But
lots of fun adventuring.
Yeah, so and it's one that I'm looking forward to reading, and hopefully some other folks will be wanting to check that one out as well.
So we'll do that one next Monday.
So then 8. For the following Monday, do we want to do just volume 3, or I would be very fine to read volume 3 and 4, since it'll be 2 weeks. How do people feel? I don't know if that would be too much. I don't know what people think.
I'd be fine with just going with 3. I mean,
Just
I'm gonna read Middle West and then so it'll be nice to kind of take a break for a week and then next week read East and West again. So yeah, that's perfect for me.
I think the fact that we didn't bring up like the kid deceiving people until the 2 minutes before the podcast, and it means we can spend an hour on a trade of this.
Yeah, just like a good therapy session. Good stuff doesn't come out until the last 7 minutes.
Of course. When Andrew Carlson is sitting there with you.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, cool. I am so grateful all of you guys showed up again, and I look forward to seeing hopefully all of you again for Middle West. And if not, I plan on calling all of you individually to make sure you're there for East of West Volume 3.
Can we just shout out Andrew Carlson killing it on the podcast last week with his spreadsheet?
Oh, yeah.
Got it.
That was fun to listen to.
It was fun doing.
I guess we could also plug that. We've got the audio podcast that comes out every week on whatever your podcast feed is.
Well,
Andrew
people seeing this on Facebook.
Yeah, Andrew just helped us do like one of the most up our own ass episodes where we just kind of talked about ourselves and the funny things that we've said.
It was
for about 40 minutes.
Those quotes were sustainable, though, man. That was, I
wish I could remember
how
saying
those
any
were
of them.
ever said.
It's just the
made me
top
miss
of the
Justin
cookie jar.
so hard.
Yeah.
I miss him.
Yeah, we all miss him, bud. We all miss him. But I got
don't listen to what all the other people say. That was perfectly enjoyable podcast listening.
And
then the most recent episode that just went up. Like,
yeah, we also
I
did
went
one
and
this
bought
week
Friday after you talking about it.
Okay, did you like it?
Yeah, I did. I think I want to know more about what's going on with it. I don't remember his name now. Like the boy who Friday is hanging out with, like he's an asshole.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we did one just sort of talking about the state of the industry yesterday. We're hoping to get like 2 up a week, but I have to, with no basis for calendar at all, it's hard to remember what days you're supposed to be recording or putting podcasts up. Like this book club on Monday is now the only fixed thing in my entire life. So it'll all orbit around this. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, okay, Django, you got this recorded or whatever?
Yeah, we got this recorded. That's Jeff.
That's Django.
And thanks
Nathan.
to Win, Will, Nathan, Andrew, Mike, and Marty.
Matt? Marty?
Maddie.
Oh, it's Marty. Oh, I like that too. All right, seriously.
Whoever that is.
Love talking to all of you, and I'm so glad you all keep doing this, and you all have such interesting thoughts and giving me new stuff to think about in this series, and you're all wonderful. So I look forward to seeing you next week for Middle West.
Later.
Everyone keep safe.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye. Just don't slayer them. Don't slayer them, Django.